Hi, welcome back to Oddly Noted, and today we're going to be talking about how to prepare for all-state auditions. In this video, we're going to be breaking up our practice into three main areas, and these three main areas are going to be three particular things that judges will have right on the sheet that they're working on when they listen to you. First and foremost is intonation. Second will be rhythm and tempo, and the third will be sound quality and written dynamics. A lot of people feel that musicality and being expressive is first and foremost, but unfortunately when jurors need to look for a particular person for an orchestra, you need to have someone that can play with others in tune with good sound quality and that will watch the conductor and play at the tempo that they need to be going at all times. In this video, I'll be using a violin, but this should be applicable to all instruments. I'll be using the 2020 All-State Audition material from Oregon Music Education Association. So let's talk about intonation first. It's terrifying for some people, but let's break it down into bite-sized chunks and make it a lot easier. First and foremost, I highly recommend that you get a tuner. You can get one on your phone, you can buy a separate one, you can buy a big one or a small one or a tiny one that fits in your pocket. I'm currently using Tunable, which is a really fun one in that there's a line that will hook onto the pitch, and once it glows green, it will start glowing both ways, but it also keeps track of all the pitches that you've done before, so you can see whether there's an improvement over a certain amount of time. You can have a tuner play back a pitch to you and try and match it. The more intonation practice that you do, the better you will get. If you practice intonation in a scale, then it will affect your pieces later on. Where to drop your fingers is probably the most important thing for me in terms of intonation. A lot of students will tend to search for a finger depending on their instrument. For violinists, we need to drop from the bass joints, and practicing this in means that we don't adjust our fingers when things are out of tune. If I were to play a note out of tune, for example, I need to make sure that I pick the finger back up and re-drop it into the correct place. By using the bass joint instead of adjusting the finger, I'll always remember that that's the distance away from the first finger that I'll need to put the two in order to get that in tune. Knowing the distance between your fingers or between two notes on your instrument is extremely important, especially with orchestral auditions. You need to know where the half steps are and the whole steps and clearly define the two. Another tool you can use when working on intonation would be to record yourself. By recording yourself, you'll be able to listen back to what you've played and have a more objective ear. Pretend you're the judge, in fact, and try not to beat yourself up too much. Just identify the fingers that are out of tune and then slowly workshop them. Workshopping is probably the most important thing in working with intonation. Don't ever go several notes without addressing intonation problems. If you work two notes for an hour, just making sure that the bass joint or the note is clearly defined, it would be more beneficial to you than working a whole piece and hoping that things are in tune the next time you go around. So most auditions have scales, and what most judges are listening for is great intonation in their scales. So using the principles that I've addressed, let's go ahead and work on an A major scale. Most auditions require that you play the scale at a certain tempo with certain bowings. Until you get the intonation up to a level that you're secure at, you need to keep it at a slow tempo. So here's the A major scale for the 2020 Oregon Music Education Association auditions. It's important to know your fingerings, and I've included a little video below for those who are unsure about fingerings and scales. There's a universal fingering that you could be using, and it's really easy once you learn it, so go ahead and give that video a try, and those are the ones that I would recommend for this particular scale. So in order to get it up to that speed, you may need to start with just two notes, and that's fine. Let's start with the first two notes. For this type of practicing, I would use my tuner first. Once I have the first note, I need to get to the next note and I need to be consistent about it. So I'm going to drop it from the bass joint and I'll use my tuner to make sure that I'm hitting the correct pitch. If I don't hit the correct pitch, with my tuner I can see whether it's higher or lower. So I need to pick it up off the string and reapproach, just adjusting slightly in the direction that I need to go. Once I have 2 notes in tune, then I would go on to the next 2 notes. So keep in mind while you're practicing it this way that you have a tuner, that you're dropping from the bass joints, that your half steps and whole steps are well defined, and that you're also recording yourself. Don't rush this process. I would recommend practicing intonation for 10-minute sequences. There's a certain point where your brain will start to give out on you and just not focus. So take the small 10 minutes and just concentrate on a few notes at a time. It's okay to be slow, especially when you're preparing for something in the fall and you're starting in summer. I would also pull out all the shifts to make sure that those are in tune separately from the work that you're doing. And you can go ahead and use the shifting video. There's a great exercise in that one down in the description below. And you can use that particular exercise for each one of your scale shifts and each one of your piece shifts that you have. For an excerpt, you do the same sort of practice in working with intonation. So for this particular audition, I have Beethoven's Symphony No. 7 and I also have Schubert's Symphony No. 2. So let's go ahead and pick out just a small group of 4 notes in the really high register on the instrument in this particular piece. I think I'll do measure 26. So find your starting pitch and use your tuner to make sure that it's nice and secure. In this case, my E flat is a little high according to the tuner, so I'm going to put my 4th finger back down and make sure that when the 3rd finger goes down, it's a little bit lower than I was playing it. I'm going to play it a couple times just to make sure that I really know where it is. And then I'll go on to the next 2 notes once I've practiced it a couple times. In this particular case, I have a half step, and it's rather close on the instrument, especially in higher positions. So I might have to sort of move one of my fingers out of the way a little bit as I put down the new finger. That's better. So that took about a minute or 2 of my time to practice just those 4 notes and make sure that I was dropping from the bass joint and helping my fingers to learn where they were supposed to go instead of searching for them every time. As you get more consistent with your intonation on 4 notes, then I would practice a series of 8 notes and then keep adding. This doesn't mean that you have to hold the rest of your practicing back. It's just that you need to take the time to practice intonation separately for a little while, then work on something else to give your brain sort of a break so you can go ahead and work on sound quality and tempo separately from intonation, and it will still help the overall intonation of the piece.